Uchenna sat in the narrow veranda of their one-bedroom apartment in a small town, studying under the dim light of a kerosene lantern. His mother, Mama Ozoemena, returned home from her job of washing clothes for people. Her wrapper was damp with sweat, her feet dusty, but her eyes sparkled with hope as she looked at her son. "Uche, have you eaten?" she asked softly. He looked up and smiled faintly. "I'm fine, Mama. I need to finish this chapter." His elder brother, Ozoemena, soon walked in carrying a sack of cement over his shoulder. His face was hardened by labor, his hands calloused. But he always managed to crack a joke when he saw his mother and brother. "Architect Uche is like you want to design the moon tonight," he teased, dropping the bag with a grunt. They laughed. It was laughter born of love, hardship, and shared dreams. Ozoemena had dropped out of secondary school to help raise Uchenna. He worked at construction sites, loading blocks, mixing concrete, and lifting iron rods under the scorching sun, all to make sure his younger brother would wear a university gown someday. And that day finally came. Uchenna graduated with a degree in architecture from the university. The whole neighborhood celebrated. His mother wore her best lace and danced in front of her compound, crying tears of joy. "My son is now a graduate," she told anyone who cared to listen. "He will change our story." But something shifted in Uchenna. He no longer laughed at Ozoemena's jokes or sat with his mother in the evenings. He began to talk about moving to a big city and leaving their small town behind. And when he finally received his certificate, he packed his bags and left, telling them he has nothing to do with poor people. His mother and Ozoemena were heartbroken, but they hoped. They believed that when their Uche settled, he would remember the hands that raised him. They didn't. Know that pride had started to cloud his heart. The city of bright lights, endless traffic, and endless hope. Uchenna stepped down from the bus with his certificate tightly folded in a brown envelope, a small duffel bag hanging from his shoulder, and pride in his heart. "I'm finally here," he whispered. "Time to change my life." He had no plan, just faith in his degree and belief that city companies were desperate for someone like him. The next day, he ironed his best shirt, polished his shoes till they shone, and printed copies of his CV at a roadside cyber cafe. He walked into one architectural firm, confident and smiling. "Good morning," he greeted the receptionist. "I'm here to see the managing director regarding a design job." "Do you have an appointment?" she asked with a raised brow. "No," he replied proudly, "but I am a first-class graduate from a famous university in this country. I'm sure he'll want to meet me." She looked at him, unimpressed. "Please drop your CV and check back in 2 weeks." That was the first disappointment. More followed. Everywhere he went, it was either, "We're not hiring," or "You need experience," or worse, no response at all. Days turned into weeks. His money ran out quickly. He moved from a friend's place to a cheap, crowded, face me, I face you in a remote part of the city. The real world didn't seem to care about his certificate. He began to resent the companies, then the system, and eventually even his own family. If Ozoemena had tried harder, maybe I would have had connections. Maybe Mama should have done more. But deep inside, Uchenna knew the truth. He was just not ready for this world. One morning, while standing by the roadside with a rumbling stomach, a former course mate passed by, driving a company-branded car. "Guy, is this you? Are you in this city?" he asked. Uchenna nodded, forcing a smile. His friend looked him over and said, "Are you still looking for a job?" "Guy, only those that have connections move forward. Me, I started as a site assistant before I was promoted." Uchenna's pride wouldn't let him reply, but something inside him began to break, 2 months had passed since Ucheoma arrived in Lagos, and life was teaching him bitter lessons every day. His once polished shoes were now scuffed. His certificate, once framed proudly in his mind, lay forgotten in his bag. Applications had become routine disappointments. He had stopped counting the number of firms he had walked into. He now lived in a cramped room with 3 other struggling young men, all with dreams just as big and broken as his. "Uche, why not try a construction site?" one of his roommates, Bala, suggested one evening as they shared a loaf of bread. Ucheoma frowned. "Me? A graduate? Go mix cement?" Bala chuckled. "Guy, hunger doesn't respect a degree." That night, Ucheoma lay on the mat, his back aching from days of roaming the city under the sun. His pride battled his hunger. He remembered his mother's face, her soft voice calling him, "My son the architect." He remembered Obina's tired eyes, always full of sacrifice and love. The next morning, he woke up early and walked to a site Bala mentioned. He didn't expect to be accepted. He just needed something. Anything. The site manager, a bulky man with tribal marks and a stern voice, looked at him skeptically. "Do you know this work?" "I can learn, sir." The man hissed. "Okay, go meet the supervisor." Ucheoma walked towards the group of workers in yellow helmets and reflective jackets. And there, standing tall with a construction map in hand, was Obina, his elder brother. Ucheoma froze. Obina looked up slowly, eyes narrowing. He dropped the paper and walked towards Uche. They stood face to face, sweat pouring down, their foreheads, hearts racing. "Uche?" Obina said, his voice low and stunned. Ucheoma looked away, shame flooding him. "I need work. Please." Obina stared at him, silence thick between them. Then he said simply, "Come tomorrow by 6 a.m., don't be late," and walked away. Ucheoma arrived at the site before 6 a.m., determined not to give his brother any reason to send him away. The workers were already gathering, their banter echoing in the early morning chill. Most wore rubber slippers or cheap boots. Ucheoma, still clinging to his past pride, had on his worn-out sneakers and a shirt that once looked formal. Obina arrived shortly after, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the workers like a man in charge. He didn't give Ucheoma any special attention. "New laborer," he barked, pointing. "Join that team mixing concrete." And just like that, the former architecture student became a site hand, shoveling sharp sand, lifting buckets of cement, fetching water under the hot sun. The first day was brutal. By noon, Ucheoma's back was screaming, his palms blistered, his shirt soaked through. He felt dizzy but refused to complain. At break time, he collapsed on a pile of blocks, panting like a hunted animal. One of the older workers offered him a sachet of pure water. "You will learn work today, young man," he said with a grin. Ucheoma managed a smile. His pride had been replaced with pain, and slowly that pain began to humble him. In the coming days, Obina still treated him like every other worker. No special favors. He corrected him harshly, demanded precision, and even gave him extra duties when he lagged behind. At night, Ucheoma would limp back to the room he now shared with Bala and 2 others. Every muscle in his body screamed, but something else stirred in him. A new kind of respect. Not just for the work, but for those who did it with dignity. One evening, as he sat alone, watching his calloused palms, he whispered, "I thought I knew everything." For the first time in years, Ucheoma sent his mother a message. "Mama, I miss you. Please pray for me." His mother sat outside her small compound, peeling cassava, when her neighbor, Mama Ifeoma, walked in with her phone raised. "Mama Obina, see this message that came to my WhatsApp. It is your Ucheoma that sent it." His mother took the phone and read slowly, her eyes squinting. "Mama, I miss you. Please pray for me." Her heart skipped. Tears welled up in her eyes. It had been months since Uchenna left rudely. Each day she looked at the road, hoping to see his familiar frame. Each night she whispered his name in prayer. Now, one message had revived her hope. She quickly took the neighbor's phone, her hands trembling. "Help me reply, please," she dictated, voice cracking with emotion. "My son, I never stopped praying. Come home when you're ready. I love you." Back in the city, Uchenna read the reply that evening, sitting on a block pile after a long day on site. His chest tightened. A lump rose in his throat. He hadn't realized how much he needed those words. The following day at work, Obina approached him during lunch break. They sat under the shade of a scaffold. "You're doing well," Obina said finally, breaking the silence. "I didn't think you'd last a day." "I almost didn't," Uchenna replied, "but I needed to feel what you felt." Obina looked at his younger brother, the one he had once bathed, taught to write, and carried to school during floods. For years he had sacrificed everything for Uchenna's future, only to be cast aside when the degree came. "You know," Obina said, "Mama cried every night after you left. She blamed herself." Uchenna looked down in shame. "I was foolish," Obina nodded. "But you're learning now. Sometimes it is life that teaches the hardest lessons." They sat in silence again until Uchenna asked quietly, "Do you think she'll forgive me?" Obina smiled faintly. "Mama's love has no end. Just don't waste this second chance." Weeks passed. Uchenna had become a different person on site. No longer sluggish or prideful, he now worked with energy and discipline. He had learned how to mix cement properly, measure blocks accurately, and even interpret some parts of the building plans. The same plans he once studied from a classroom, he now saw come to life from the ground. And he was beginning to appreciate the wisdom that comes not just from books, but from sweat, struggle, and experience. Obina began to involve him more in supervisory tasks. He would hand him blueprints to carry, sometimes ask him to monitor deliveries, or double-check the site log. One evening after work, Obina invited him to the small apartment he rented nearby. It was modest, a mattress, a table, a small stove. But it was clean and orderly. "I never expected you'd be here," Obina said, offering him a plate of gari and egusi soup. "Honestly, neither did I," Uchenna replied. "I thought my certificate was enough to open every door." Obina chuckled. "The certificate is good, but it can't replace character. The city will humble you if you carry only paper without sense." Uchenna laughed quietly. "You've changed. You talk like a boss now. How did you end up in the city, and how come you became a boss?" Obina shook his head. "I've seen life, and life doesn't follow a textbook. Immediately you left, the company promoted and transferred me to the city." Then he opened an old drawer and brought out a plastic file. Inside were newspaper clippings, photos of Uchenna's convocation, and copies of job adverts. "I kept these," Obina said. "Even after you left, I still prayed you'd make it." Uchenna swallowed hard. "I didn't deserve that. You're my brother. You don't need to earn my love. Just respect it." That night, Uchenna slept on the mattress while Obina used a mat. As he lay staring at the ceiling, Uchenna whispered a silent vow. "I'll rebuild what I broke." After 3 months of hard labor and learning, Uchenna finally asked Obina a question he had been too afraid to voice. "Bro, do you think I can go back home?" Obina didn't answer immediately. He stirred the pot of yam porridge he was cooking and replied softly, "If you're truly ready, not just to return, but to apologize, then yes." Uchenna nodded, lips tight. "I want to. I need to see Mama." Obina looked up. "You'll have to face more than Mama. Neighbors, uncles, even friends. You called us poor and left like you had outgrown all of us. I know, Ucheoma said quietly, but I'm ready to face them. They planned the journey for the following weekend. When they arrived in town, the whole street buzzed. Their mother was sitting on her wooden stool in front of the house when she saw her sons approaching. Her hands dropped. My son! She ran to him, wrapper flying, arms open wide. Ucheoma knelt immediately, tears flooding his eyes. Mama, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for the way I left, for everything I said, for thinking I was better than you and Obina. She held him tightly, sobbing into his shoulder. You're home. That's all that matters. You came back. Obina stood silently watching the reunion, his own eyes moist. Later, as neighbors gathered to welcome the architect-turned-builder, Ucheoma sat humbly, answering their questions, nodding and smiling without pride. One man teased, "So the book did not teach you that cement is heavy?" They all laughed, and Ucheoma joined them. For the first time in years, he felt peace, not the peace that comes from achievement, but the one that follows repentance and restoration. That night, Mama brought out the special pot she reserved for festive days. As they all ate together, she said, "Let this food seal our new beginning." Ucheoma looked around the room, at Mama, at Obina, and smiled. He was finally home in every sense of the word. Life in town had changed, but not as much as Ucheoma had. Gone was the proud graduate who had looked down on his roots. In his place stood a young man who now understood the value of sacrifice, family, and real-life struggle. After spending 2 weeks at home, Ucheoma decided to remain in the town for a while. I want to give back to this place, he told Obina one evening. I ran away thinking I was too big here, but maybe this is where I should start again. Obina nodded. There's nothing wrong with starting small as long as you're moving forward. Together, they began to volunteer on small community building projects, from church renovations to helping a neighbor sketch out her poultry farm. Ucheoma used his architectural knowledge in practical ways, learning how to work with both pen and hand. Soon, word began to spread around town that architect Uche was back. Not with pride, but with purpose. One day, a local contractor visited their home. We hear that you know how to draw house plans and also calculate foundation cost. I have a small project. Let's talk. That small project became Ucheoma's first real job, a redesign of an old bungalow into a 2-flat compound. He worked with local artisans, supervised the structure alongside Obina, and even added manual labor when needed. The project was successful, and others began to call. But more importantly, Ucheoma now worked with gratitude in his heart. He began saving part of his pay for their mother, ensuring her market hustle reduced. He even helped Obina purchase better tools and drew up a small business plan to register a construction partnership under both their names. Obi Uche Designs Construction. It was Obina who came up with the name, a fusion of both their names that meant Heart of Wisdom. And indeed, wisdom had finally taken root in Ucheoma. Months passed, and Obi Uche Designs Construction began gaining recognition, not just in the town, but in nearby towns. They combined Ucheoma's architectural skills with Obina's site experience, a perfect blend of theory and practice. The boys who once struggled to eat now had clients waiting weeks for consultations, but Ucheoma never allowed success to return him to arrogance. He wore his humility like a badge of honor. One day, during a town hall meeting, the chairman stood up and announced, "We are proud to say that our own sons, Ucheoma and Obina, have brought dignity back to honest labor. They are proof that you don't need to travel far to succeed." There was applause, but Ucheoma's eyes were fixed on their mother, who sat at the back with a wrapper tied firmly across her chest, her face glowing with pride. Tears gathered in her eyes as she whispered, "God, thank you." After the meeting, a young secondary school student approached Ucheoma shyly. "Sir, I want to study architecture like you," he said, "but my family is poor." Ucheoma smiled. "Then you're already like me. Come by the office next week. We'll talk." He had finally come full circle, from being the boy who was helped to the man who now helped others. One evening, as he and Ozoemena shared a bottle of malt on the porch, Ucheoma said, "Do you think all of this would have happened if I didn't fail in the city?" Ozoemena leaned back and replied, "Sometimes failure is a classroom. You just have to stop fighting the teacher and learn the lesson." They both laughed. As the sun set over their small but growing construction office, Ucheoma felt something he had never felt before. Fulfillment. Not because of fame, not because of money, but because he had become a man of honor. The following week, Ucheoma received an invitation from his university. The Faculty of Environmental Studies was hosting a homecoming event for distinguished alumni, and his name was on the list of guest speakers. At first, he hesitated. He thought about the shame of how he left the city, how pride nearly destroyed him. But Ozoemena encouraged him. "Tell them the truth. Somebody out there needs your story." With their mother beaming beside him and Ozoemena standing like a rock behind him, Ucheoma traveled back to the university, not as a fresh graduate, but as a man who had passed the hardest course, life. On the day of the event, he stood before hundreds of students in the university auditorium, his voice steady and clear. "I graduated here full of dreams and full of pride," he began. "I thought my certificate would open every door, but I soon learned that in the real world, nobody owes you anything. It's not just about paper, it's about perseverance, humility, and people." He paused, then added, "My real education started when I failed, when I became a construction worker out of necessity. That's when I truly became an architect, not just of buildings, but of my own life." The hall was silent, and then a wave of applause thundered through the air. After his speech, students surrounded him, eager to learn, to ask questions, to understand how failure could lead to growth. When he returned to his town that evening, his mother cooked her special bitter leaf soup. As they ate, she reached into her wrapper and handed Ucheoma a framed picture of his graduation day. "I kept this safe," she said, "but I think you've earned something bigger now." Ucheoma smiled. "I have, Mama. I finally know that the true certificate is character." They all laughed, a deep, free laughter that came from wounds healed and lessons learned. And as the stars glittered above their little home, Ucheoma knew one thing for sure. He hadn't just returned home, he had finally arrived.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, comment what you learned from the story, like the video, and also share to support our channel. See you in our next story.